Skal vi se, oi, kanskje finne presentasjonen her. Jeg skal presentere først på vegne av Ylva Seierstad, en annen student fra studiet vårt, som dessverre ikke kunne være her i dag, fordi vi jobber fortsatt med diplomoppgaver, som... Sorry, I completely forgot. We are, of course, at an international conference. So I am first going to present on behalf of another fellow student of us called Ylva Seierstad, who could not be here today because she has to work on her diploma project. I feel like that is a very valid excuse. So the year after Sigurd and Jacques did the classical studio with Branko, we had a lot of students also wanting to do this because the drawings and the watercolors that Sigurd and Jacques produced, they were very convincing. They were beautiful pieces of illustration, and also the building was exactly what a lot of us had always wanted to design but could not do. We never had the chance to do it in the other education we had received thus far. So this is what I have produced previously in my education before Branko. It's not very good architecture, I don't think so. And we would use mainly digital tools, ArchiCAD, Rhinoceros, AutoCAD. This removes the hand, as was mentioned earlier, from the process. It makes it very, you're removed from the composition by a screen and a computer mouse. And it doesn't give you the intuitive feeling of design that you would get from learning the classical process. When you design classical architecture, you have to work with your hand, like this. You feel instantly when you're working with a surface, this is a facade, of course, that this composition is not right if it's not right. And you don't get this as intuitively when you're working digitally, and when you're working in model, as when you work in 2D with drawings. And of course, with Branko, our course had 3 assignments. I'm going to talk you through the course now, first, that we had. Where first, we would do watercolorings, exercises in watercolor, mainly with making windows or some composition. This was one of the first attempts we did at watercoloring that semester. This is another example. They're very bad. These are relatively bad watercolors, I would say. We had not done this before. Many of the students, we had never touched a watercoloring pencil before. So we will see later what we actually ended up producing through the semester, as Branko introduced us to his first proper architecture assignment, which was this. It is a spatial plan. It's a plan drawing, essentially, with a central space and a simple portico, where the assignment was very simple. It's not a program. You don't need to make a functioning building with this. It's just an introduction to thinking about the space. Here, the assignment is basically design the central space, make a portico and a facade, and a staircase leading to an ambulatory space around the central space. And this was the plan I ended up producing. And you can instantly see how this is very different from how modern architectural plans work, where you have the central space takes all priority. I'm not going to talk as much about this because Sigurd already did a wonderful talk about how this spatial composition in design takes priority over the functions. But here also you get the leftover spaces. They fill out the necessary requirements for the building. And then afterwards you are left with a shape that you can alter with pochés and shapes to make or organize and compose a beautiful facade. Here's a section of the same building. And the facades. This was our first classical project where we worked with the exterior and the interior. But the important part to extract from this is that the classical process is not an outside-in, the facade takes all priority process at all. It's actually quite the opposite. I would say in classical architecture, you are working from the inside out even more so than modern architecture, where I think it's more concept down. So the main assignment we got from Branko later on was to design on a quite, it's a very different site from what Sigurd and Jacques was working with. We had a triangular, very unsymmetrical site in Trondheim. This is one of the plans from the project, where you can see how it lies in the context. There is the river running through Trondheim, Ylva, and this is a part of the NTNU campus. So the assignment we had was a small astronomy museum and a planetarium for the Vitensenteret, a museum in Trondheim, where we were working then with the assignment, which was making exhibition spaces and a main central hall where you could enter with large groups and not stand outside in the rain, as was the case with the current museum, where the hallway is very small. And then the planetarium, where you can show on a large screen or analog planetarium the night sky and simulate it within a space. So I'm not going to go very much into detail. This is my plan for how I did it, where you can connect the building to the various other surrounding structures and try to make it a part of the urban fabric of the area also. Many of these drawings that I'm showing, they are on exhibition in the hall outside. So please go and check them out after in the break. Here's the second floor, and you can see how this central hallway, which was the main problem of the last museum, it takes priority along with the planetarium, and all the other spaces protrude from them and become secondary spaces or tertiary spaces. A section also. And now I'm going to just show you some of the results from this studio, where in NTNU, we feel like we were working a little bit in a vacuum, knowledge-wise, about how to do watercoloring. As I mentioned, none of the students almost had touched watercoloring before, and this made it so we had to try and figure out how to do it almost from scratch. Branko is a great tutor. He gave us a lot of tips, and we had some other professors also who are very sympathetic with our cause, who would also aid us occasionally. And the result is we have learned a lot, but we don't have the body of knowledge embodied in the student mass like schools who have been doing this for a longer time, such as Notre Dame have. So this is very much something we are working on currently, and I'll return to that later also. This is still my planetarium project, and this is a perspective of it. Perspective drawing is also something we have never done in an organized way in NTNU before. So constructing a perspective and presenting it through hand drawing was a very demanding exercise. But you learn so much more from doing these kinds of studios than from doing just another modern studio. This is a project by Jeppe, who is also here, another student from NTNU. I will inform you, he's also one of the first 2 people in Norway who will do a classical diploma project for his master thesis in 93 years or so. And this is not his diploma project. I will show you a sneak peek of that later, at his permission. So I'll just go through the other projects now, and we will go on to the next part, which is my actual presentation. So this is a project by Ylva, who was supposed to hold this talk. Another perspective. This is a project by Emil, who is not here today, unfortunately, but he is the other student who is doing a classical thesis this semester. Also a very talented student. Another perspective. This one is by Håvard, who is sitting here. Another project by Håvard also, which he completed after doing the classical studio, but under the supervision of another professor at NTNU. The interesting part about having had this studio is now other professors have to open up about allowing students to do classical work in other studios also. And this makes it so that we can give advice to younger students and encourage them and support the idea that it is legal, it's not sin to do traditional design, and it is spreading very efficiently at NTNU. Yes, so this is the end of the first presentation. Going to just keep on going here. So there we go. So I'm going to talk about what the future hopefully holds for Norwegian architecture and architecture students at NTNU. We have been experimenting a lot with techniques. As I said, we are working perhaps more so in a knowledge vacuum than I would say other places, since we haven't done this for a very long time. So maybe we are innovative, maybe we are naive. We'll see. Anyways, we have done a lot of interesting experiments. So I'm just showing again these first drawings that we made, after 1 semester of doing watercolors, the skill level went up quite fast, I would say. This is the process that we used when we started drawing this, where we would draw it digitally in AutoCAD, and then we would trace it on a light table with pencil, ruler, and tracer, and we would get these large watercolor papers where you get a ditch where the pen has gone. This makes it possible to do watercolor. Without it, it's nearly impossible to get the watercolors to not bleed into the paper, and it gives you the crisp shapes. I'm going very into the nitty-gritty now, but I don't know how many of you have done watercolors before. Have any of you done so? Raise a hand if you have. Yeah, it's quite a few. Yeah. Good. So what we invented, I would say, is you can laser cut drawings from digital mediums. This makes it possible to draw a lot of stuff digitally. Of course, the process should be, ideally, and is still for the students, by hand mostly. And then when you start drawing them like technical illustrative drawings, documentation drawings like this, you can draw them digitally to get them perfect. And then you can laser cut them and watercolor them by hand. You can see here the lines in the paper here are from the laser cutter. And then you go over them with a pen, and you get a perfect, crisp, beautiful drawing with the ditches ready for watercolor, and it works perfectly. And this has allowed us to do some very interesting things. We are now running a student organization at NTNU called Acanthus that has been doing workshops with watercolor, where because of this technique, we can mass-produce drawings and give them to students, first-year students, second-year students, and this allows them to try it themselves. And we can teach watercoloring techniques from very early in the education, which raises the level of skill, so that hopefully in 2 or 3 years, the students coming out of NTNU will be very proficient at doing this compared to what we were. So these are some of the first and second-year students' work, and some of ours also. And we are also hosting guest lectures. This is from quite recently, where we did a guest lecture by Murbyen in Oslo, which gave us then a talk about traditional bricklaying techniques and traditional brick buildings in urban environments in Oslo and around Norway. And this was a very late lecture. People showed up voluntarily outside of school times to watch this lecture, and it was a very intense lecture because everyone wanted to ask questions. This subject, it causes a lot of energy in students, and we can really feel that when we are working with these subjects in NTNU. So something else we have been working with also is 3D modeling and producing ornaments digitally. So this is the volutes of a Corinthian capital that I have modeled in Rhino, and then put it on top of a simplified bell-shaped Corinthian bell, and put it into a 3D printing software so that I could produce it digitally without doing all this precision work myself. And then you can put modeling clay on it. You can make a latex mold, and you can cast a column with your own custom ornaments. And this makes it so that we can work with ornament design. Of course, you can tell we're not master plaster workers. This is the first casting attempt we did, but it's improving. So working digitally and manually combined to produce ornaments is something we have not done at NTNU for 100 years also. And Anders has been working actually quite dedicatedly in digitalizing old ornamentation books from the old architecture school here in Oslo that he has been so generous to share with us. Here's another example done by a student who is here today, Frank, who CNC cut a Doric order from MDF. So you can also then model it digitally, produce it 100% digitally also, and then, of course, if you want, you can embellish it by hand later. And it just gives us the opportunity as architects to work with the ornament and not rely on craftsmanship, which is very lacking in Norway today, sadly. Or ideally, of course, we would wish there was more and we could rely on craftsmen. But if the opportunity is not there, then hopefully future Norwegian architects are able to produce ornaments themselves for buildings. Here's a show a close-up of the triglyph that was made. This is quite small. It's also an exhibition out there, so you can go and have a look. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the master thesis projects I mentioned previously. So the first project I mentioned, which is Jeppe's, he is taking a competition in Trondheim about this fish market called Ravnkloa, and where there has been a competition, and there were 4 participants, and 2 of these won. And of course, these participants were very unpopular. Arkitekturopprøret in Trondheim has been very active in showing how this was not a very democratic process at all, similarly to what we heard from the United States earlier. And the Jeppe's assignment is about showing how you could do this successfully in a way that does not ruin the surroundings. You can see here the site. This picture is quite dark, but all of the surrounding buildings are wooden, traditional buildings in Trondheim. So the context is it's very demanding, actually, and you can't just plonk a modern building down there and say that's a job well done, as easily as you could in many other cities. I mean, this is how Trondheim actually looks. It is a place with a lot of character and soul, and this here is actually Jeppe's proposal for the fish market. It's a very beautiful building, done in a very appropriate style for Trondheim, where it's not a classical building in the strict sense of the word, but it draws from the knowledge and it uses the proportions, and it is very coherent with what we have been learning. Here are some drawings from the section and the plan. They are not completed. Jeppe, of course, is still working on this project. So this is just a little sneak peek. Hopefully he will be able to present it at some later time. The next assignment, the next master thesis, is about the Student Society building in Trondheim. This building, very nice building, Art Deco-like, very unique in many ways, and people really love it. So there was another architecture competition, of course. And this was the winning proposal, where they would make a glass box and then a separate building that maybe imitates some conceptual sense of this previous building, and this is a render of it, made by Eggen Arkitekter. And it is not a very popular proposal. It's better than many things being built, but it's not relating to the old building in any meaningful way, except for having the logo on it. So this is Emil's proposal, which of course uses the language of the old building, which he has analyzed through the year, and produces a very coherent building. He also has plans and sections, of course, and it's a fully functional building design, which I cannot show you here. But here is a picture of his working model. Agreed. I am also now working on my master thesis, which is the last thing I'm going to talk about. It is not ready yet. I'm finishing in Christmas, around Christmas time. But I'm taking this behemoth and making a counter-proposal. I would, of course, never say that you should tear it down, because that would be an environmental disaster, the way it's been built. But my idea is, of course, to try and take this building and make something more beautiful in this very nice site in this very center of Oslo, where the city really deserves something beautiful, and it has the precedence for building beautiful things in the area. And that is, here is a quote from Responsanalyse in Norway, where 7 out of 10 Norwegians think the new National Museum is very ugly. This is, of course, the new National Museum. Yes. I think I'll end it there, and hopefully I can present you this next year. Thank you.